guys, my name is Kenzie and welcome to a watercolor tutorial, and today we're painting this strawberry basket. This painting was a lot of fun, but it was also kind of tricky and a little tedious. So if this is your first time, buckle up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Just have patience and take breaks if you need to, but at the end, if you keep pushing yourself and keep going, it's going to turn out great. And the reason why I picked strawberry basket is because since I was a little girl, I used to always go strawberry picking, and now as an adult, I have 3 kids of my own. Every year we still go strawberry picking. So I thought that it would be so fun to paint something that's a little meaningful to me and also challenging and will push me as well out of my comfort zone. But yeah, I love how it turned out. Let's get painting. So let's go over the supplies that I have. I've already taped on my painting into this little cardboard sheet. I like that if I'm not able to finish my project, I can just like move it around so I'm not sticking it to my desk. I also have my paint palette here. I'm using all Winsor Newton in this palette. I have a cloth for me to dab, and then I have 2 different water cups right here. I have one for warm and one for cool. So let's get started. So I want to kind of give this strawberry basket the effect of like a green wash in the background, I guess I should say. So I'm gonna lay my water down first because we are gonna do the wet on wet technique. And try your best to not go over the lines at this point. It makes it a little bit tricky to kind of layer, but if you do, it's really not the end of the world. So I'm just gonna go around my basket, and I'm not gonna make it look like there's a perfect line around the edges here, but making sure you're having enough water to at least apply that first layer. And you're gonna see some gaps here within my basket, and that's because I want my basket to have some flowers in it. So right now I'm using my sap green, and I'm gonna load up my palette with a lot of water using my sap green. And then I'm gonna bring some red. I feel like it just gives it a really nice earthy tone to it. Adding more sap green. Okay, so I'm gonna apply my first layer around my basket. And because this is the wet on wet technique, you're gonna see that it kind of just explodes around the page, which is exactly what we want. We want there to be soft blends and not any harsh lines. And with watercolor paper, if you use the wet on dry technique for backgrounds, sometimes you'll find that it's a little trickier to blend that way. So at least for me, when I'm doing my backgrounds and covering large spaces of, things on my paper, I will use the wet on wet technique. So I'm gonna try to have more pigment towards my basket, and I'm gonna want there to be a fade towards the edge. And I'm also gonna leave like little white space, which is just basically leaving the paper to kind of shine through, because I do want to have some flowers in the distance as well. So as I'm going up, I'm going to try my best to leave some white space. And even right here, I want to pull some green here. So because I didn't leave any white space, since it's still wet, I can actually just use a damp brush. You see how I'm tapping my brush into my water, tapping my napkin. I'm picking up any green, tapping it on my napkin as well. I probably should have focused on leaving white space, but that's okay. All right, so I'm gonna go around now and do the rest of my basket, trying to keep in mind leaving some white space for a flower. And this part does not have to be perfect, because if we're not loving how it's looking, we can always just put a second layer on as well. Remember how we talked about we didn't want to have it be like a perfect line around the edge, so you'll see how it's gonna be softer around here. So even if you just have to lift up some of this green a bit, so it's more of like a softer blend. And even right here, I need to go over some of the white because it's starting to blend in. That's okay. And I don't want to go too far into my basket as well, but I also want to leave a lot of space for these flowers as well. So I'm going to leave the bottom part at least just very airy and loose, and then I can come around and fix the bottom part. But I at least just wanted to kind of get the first layer down. Okay, cool. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm gonna go ahead and dry this really quick so I can move on to my next step. If you guys don't have a dryer, it's not a necessity, but I definitely recommend having a dryer because it means that you can just move on throughout your project without not being stuck. Because I can't move on to my strawberries or my basket because if I do, all the colors are gonna blend and bleed. So for me, I like to have a dryer on hand. Okay, so I have dried my background now, so I'm able to paint anywhere I'd like. But I first want to fill out this space right here, and because it is a smaller space, I'm just going to use a wash of that green. A wash basically just means like a lot of water inside your palette there, so it's not very pigmented. And then I'm gonna make it a little bit darker by just adding a little bit more pigment, and because it's still wet, it will have a nice bleed to it, or a natural blend, I should say. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna dry this real quick too. So I think because I already have my green in my palette, I'm gonna go ahead and do my greenery in my strawberry as well. And I think that will also help us kind of stay focused of, okay, what's green, what's red, and just kind of help us out a little bit. So I'm mixing sap green with this darker green right here, and I am gonna mix a little bit of that red we were talking about before to give it a more earthy tone. Mix some more darker color. And a little bit of brown, lighter brown to it. Okay, I like that color. I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna do some different shades of green. So you know what I might do is I'm gonna mix a couple different types of greens. Let's do like a lighter, more vibrant green. And then over here, let's make this a dark green. Sometimes I find that it's good to prep my colors before I get going on a project. I'm mixing indigo with this now, this green color. Okay, and I added a little bit of cadmium red to make my darker shade. Okay, yeah, so I like to just mix my colors already in my palette as I go. I just find that it's easier if I want to, you know, tap different points to create different shadows with different colors. It's already ready to go. I don't have to stop and mix, because you'll see even here, it's already dry, which can be kind of annoying when you don't want there to be layers. So I definitely recommend mixing your colors. So another thing to keep in mind too is when you're painting the strawberry leaves, just to try to use the very tip of your brush. I'm using size 8, but you might want to go smaller. My brush here I find has got a very nice thin tip to it, so it's not really bothering me that much. And see how this is wet? I'm able to touch it and it creates some nice contrast inside your colors. So right here, and you're looking for the kind of jagged lines. You're seeing any jagged lines? Those are the wonky little strawberry leaves, and they're not supposed to look perfect. And we can, you know, do a couple layers here and really build up some nice elements to these. And again, try to play around with the different greens that you've already mixed in your palette so they all don't look the same. And this is the part about loose watercolor. They can feel so difficult because you're like, oh, every leaf might want to look perfect. But in reality, these are not perfect lines at all. You'll see sometimes I'm not even staying in my sketch lines. I'm kind of going over a little bit, and that's okay. So I'm really just kind of trying to focus in, tapping different points that I've just completed, or even you can go on and highlight by just getting rid of all of the paint on your brush, tap your napkin, and you can even scoop. See how that creates a very nice highlight right here? I love the scooping technique. Okay, look for any type of jagged line in here. That means that there's a leaf. Again, just using the very tips of your brush. And what we'll do is we'll do second layers and some shadows in these leaves once we have the strawberries completed as well. I also feel like it's kind of damp right here, which is why I'm doing this, because I don't want to smudge. Probably could have done a better job of drawing. So if I feel like my hand's damp, I'm trying to get rid of it. Over here, there's lots of little wiggly lines, lots and lots of them. Yeah, I feel like because we're gonna do our leaves first, it'll really kind of help us stay focused on what's the top of a strawberry and the bottom of a strawberry. Over here, there's some lines. There's a line right here that's kind of hard to see. This looks like a little line. It looks like the butt of a strawberry. And then right here, there's like a bunch of wiggly lines right here too. Okay, so I'm gonna scan over, kind of make sure I'm looking for any squiggly lines. Oh, I see one right here I've missed. Okay, if I keep painting and I see one, I can always do that. We can always fill it in. Okay, cool. So now we can get on to the fun part, which is the strawberry itself. I'm just using a baby wipe to get rid of some colors. But one thing I'm gonna start doing right from the beginning, is what I'm gonna do right from the beginning, is I'm gonna look for these strawberries that you can clearly tell are the top of the strawberries. They're sitting on top, and then I'll slowly work my way down to the bottom ones. But I think once I start getting all of these ones completed and done, I'll have a good idea of which strawberries need to kind of sit underneath them because they're kind of the bottom, or if there's any like awkward spacing. I also need to mix up some orange, so let me put some yellow in here. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this strawberry right here. And I am just gonna apply my first tone. You know what? I want to get rid of this green right here. I need more space. I want a darker red. And I'm gonna touch different points with different shades of red. And I also kind of want there to be some highlight, so I'm also going to scoop up some color with a damp brush. And again, because this is wet on wet, this will just be a very natural blend. Just kind of do its thing. Okay, that is my first strawberry done. So I'm not gonna do the one right next to it because it's all just kind of gonna bleed and do its thing. So I'm slowly just gonna start working my way around to different points. Yeah, I'm really glad I did my leaves first. I guess try not to touch your strawberry that's wet too. That will help. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of all of the paint on my brush and just use the paint that I already have on my page and move that around. So I want the top to be a little bit more brighter than the bottom here. There you go. I'm gonna come over here. I pulled up some photos of strawberries too, so I'm just looking at different strawberries and how the light hits them. Okay, so I am going to, ooh, that's very vibrant. I like that. I want to add a little bit of green to the bottom of this one. I know sometimes the strawberries at the bottom aren't completely ripe yet. And I'm just gonna use a little bit of that orangey mix and I'm gonna pull down until it touches that green color. And I want some highlight, so I'm gonna scoop up some color. I want to add a little bit more green to the bottom of this one. Okay. So the reason why I picked this photo is because strawberry picking is like one of my family's favorite thing to do. We love to take our kids and we will go pick strawberries. So I thought, what better painting to kind of paint in August when strawberry picking, well really strawberry picking is in June, but there's some late strawberry picking if you didn't already know, and we'd love to take our kids. And I'm going to be lifting and highlighting different points as well. I'm not going to worry about this little spot right here because I can just lift that up or cover it with some brown when I get over to that part. Yeah, I want there to be a shadow on this one. And I might just make it a little bit more vibrant in here. That was way too much pigment, so I just tapped it on my cloth right here, and I'm just going to use the tip of my brush to kind of smooth it out. And just using the paint that I already have on my sheet. I'm not adding any more paint. Okay, cool. I love how this one turned out, and I'll show you how I did it on a bigger strawberry right here. So what I did was I went in with like my first layer, which is basically just like a wash of red. So let me cover all of this and I'll show you what I did, because I actually really like how that turned out. I'm getting rid of that's way too much pigment. So I'm just using some wash now of red, covering that. So if I want my highlight to kind of be on the center, I went in with that darker red, and while it was wet, I just kind of went around the sides right here. And I left wherever I wanted that natural shadow to be, and just using water, you can even blend this out just that much more. Ooh, I love that. So that would technically be, I mean, it's still white on wet, but that would kind of be another layer. And I can even do that, take that a step further and add a little bit of darkness right here. Look at that. So there's 1, 2, 3 layers right there on that strawberry. Beautiful, I love that. I'm gonna keep kind of doing that. I like how that turned out. So again, I have my wash of my color. I'm gonna go around the sides now. I'm gonna go in with that darker color. Oh, indigo is right here. And just kind of shadow the bottom a little bit. So you can see 1, 2, 3. 3 layers on this, and this was all used with wet on wet technique. Another way you can actually shadow as well is by putting like your layer or your shadow color, sorry, already down first, and then you can put your color on top. So I'll show you right here. So if I want there to be my shadow, so I'm gonna use purple. I try not to use black when I shadow, because I just find that it just gets too dark and too dull. And I wanna create a little bit of a highlight because it's pretty dark. It's gonna make that strawberry very dark. So I'm gonna lift some of that purple color I have down. I'm gonna dry this to show you real quick. So if I was to now go in with my red, see how it just kind of sits on top of it? That's pretty cool too. You can do it like that as well. There's a couple different ways that you can shadow. You can do the wet on wet, or you can kind of do the layering, the wet on dry layering, or you can do this technique too. It's called alla prima, where it's basically you're moving and manipulating your colors around on your page. So those are 3 different types of techniques that you can use for your strawberries. So it's kind of fun just to play around with each of them. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kind of mix around different techniques here. fun to kind of practice these skills. So you'll see here how these two strawberries are kind of blending too much, which I don't like. So I have to make one of them stand out a little bit more. And I'm gonna choose this one. So I have to make it a little bit brighter. And that's what I think we're gonna have to do a lot of with these strawberries as we go. We need to layer these. Some of these is their first layer, so I'm not too worried. And see how now already, because I have that second layer, that strawberry is dry, it already stands out from this one. So that's what we're gonna have to do. And this strawberry down here at the bottom, I can already tell it's kind of gonna be sandwiched underneath all of these strawberries. So I'm just gonna put a shadow strawberry down there. And as well as over here, like right here. It's as if it's trying to poke its way through. So I'm just gonna add some dark red down here for these strawberries that are at the bottom. And I'll go in and add another color. Oh, I just found a green that I missed right here.
I'm just layering on top of the shadow that I put down right here. Just to get a little bit more redness. Okay, we're almost done with the first layer, guys. Almost done. And some of you might be asking why I just didn't cover all of it with, one color and then just tap different points of it. And that would have been another technique that we could do, but I also feel like I would probably have to layer on top, like, maybe 3 or 4 times to kind of get a nice effect. Whereas right here already, because I've been skipping around and like rotating my colors, I'm able to clearly see which one is a strawberry. Like it's, I don't know. I'm gonna edit that part out. Let's see.
I'm gonna add a little bit of a rose color to some of these with some cadmium red. Mix it in with that indigo. I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna go in here. We're starting to get into the little spaces, so just make sure you're still using the very tip of your brush. And if you go over the green, it's really not the end of the world, but try your best. And I'm just gonna flip around and just add different shades onto my brush as I'm moving along. Where else? So right here, I think would be a little bit more shadowed because it's underneath the strawberry. So I'm gonna make this one a little bit darker than the others. And then this right here is basket, but if you cover it as a strawberry, honestly, I don't think it matters. But yeah, there's like a little triangle part right here that should be basket, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. Oh, I'm on my last one. Yay. Okay, so fun. Okay, so what I want to do is let this dry and then I'll come back to it. And then that way we can kind of pull this together a bit. So what I want to do is put our first layer of our basket down. So I'm going to dry this. I was mostly concerned about right here and around here, but it looks like that's already pretty dry. Okay, so I'm actually just going to use this orangey red color that I already had mixed. I'm adding lots of water to it, and then I'm going to mix up a nice brownie color to it. And I'm just going to throw down my first layer. So I think we talked about this at the beginning. It's all about putting your lightest layers down first with watercolor. Acrylic is opposite, right? Like you can go in with your dark colors and then you can go in with your highlights and it kind of sits on top and it looks good. With watercolor, if you start too dark, you can't really layer on top of it. So my advice to you is always start with the color wash. We talked about that earlier as well, which is basically just a lot of water in your color. And then you put your wash down and then you can go in and add your details, your shadows, stuff like that. And that can be the trickiest part of painting with watercolor, is you just go in way too dark and then it just kind of loses depth. Okay, so I want to kind of highlight some parts of this. So I'm just going to go into different parts and just kind of scoop up the very top right here at the basket. See how I'm scooping up the color here? And as I see when I start to drag brown and I'm not really picking up anymore, I'm going to be tapping my napkin because I want it to be clear. And then I want this line to get thinner as we go around the corner to like right here. So there is my highlight of my basket. It looks like up here is pretty much dry. I can try to lift up some color by just kind of shaking around my brush and moving it around. Okay. Let's try this. And I'm going to be mixing this yellow color with some green. And I'm going to start kind of freehanding some flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a dome-like shapes. And they can be little domes or big domes. So a line, a dome. I'll do it back here too. And I'm trying to look for where it's a little bit lighter. Where here I have some space. And as I go out towards the edge here, I want them to be a lot smaller, right? Because they're supposed to look like they're in the distance. I'll do a big one right here. And inside the basket, you'll see that there are some lines missing. And that's because we want to have some of these flowers around the basket area. Okay, so I'm going to come in now with my Dr. Phil Martin's Bleed Proof White. I love this. I have it linked in my Amazon. And just for really this part right here for now. And what happened was when I scooped up some of the water, it still kind of kept bleeding as it was still wet. So I lost some of my white in my paper. So I'm just going to go in and make my flowers with this. This is like a really strong pigmented white. You'll see it just kind of sits on top of it. And I'm going to do petal-like shapes around these flowers. And the ones that are in the background with this green, we might have to go over it a few times, but that's okay. And I am not making these petals, like you'll see I'm moving really fast. I'm not making these petals look perfect at all. I'm gonna pick a really strong color, so I'll show you in purple. Now that I have my little bud right here in my center, I'm going in with the very tip of my brush, just touching the center, and I'm coming out and making these kind of shapes. The key here is to be leaving white space. I'm going to put this down flat. Leave white space. These petals are not perfect. You'll see here, this is the loose watercolor part. And as you're going around the dome, you'll see how it starts to kind of do like a nice curve. So make sure they're just all not coming down like this, like one line, right? You don't want it to be a straight line. You kind of want it to have a natural curve to it. So again, if this was my center of my bud, I'm going with the very tip of my brush, pulling it out, leaving white space, trying to leave a curve. And then when we do our ones that are centered, let me show you that one. If this was our center, we can go around again, just doing some loose flowers, loose petals, sorry. Going towards my center. Oh, that one looks kind of wonky. Going around. And you'll see that these are not perfect at all. They're supposed to be loose watercolor. And I promise it feels kind of awkward because you might want every petal to look absolutely perfect, but it comes together. I promise. Okay, so I'm switching to my smaller brush. I have a size 8 here, but my 8, remember, it has a nice point to it. So I'm able to do that. Okay, so staying with my green background layer. I'm going to be doing the ones that are kind of drooping down lower. I'll probably do 4 or 5 petals on each. I don't want too much water on my brush. I want more paint so it kind of sits on top. Yeah, you can see how now that I'm painting over it, a second layer, it's starting to kind of shine through a lot more. But the key to this paint is to not have too much water on your brush. I'm gonna do a third layer. Yeah, it's working great. And the reason why this is working for me with the colors being able to sit on top like this is because I went really light. Granted, this, I painted a black cat before, and I was able to paint whiskers and different types of white furs on it because of this paint. So I don't think this matters if it's light or dark. This will paint on top of anything. But you can see the contrast between the colors of this bud because I went really light. I'm going to dry this so I'm not smudging it everywhere. Give me a sec. Okay, let's move on to this side. And I'm just repeating the exact same thing that I just did. Do stems coming down for these ones. And they don't have to be straight. I want to do maybe one or two more over here. I'm gonna fill out any awkward space with the stems that I might have. Do one down here. Oh, I guess I should do some inside the basket too. I didn't even think about that. I have like a cluster of flowers over here. I'll do one probably over here to break it up. I gotta get this white on my brush. That is what I'm going to do. I thought about, because there's really two ways I could have gone about doing these type of flowers. And one of them is using masking fluid. This acts as like a barrier. So when I paint this on top, I'm able to then let this dry and then I can paint over it and then it leaves white space, which I will do like right here for these flowers. I'll do it for some. So I'll use a combination of masking fluid to show you guys what that looks like as well. It's really cool. I use masking fluid and this white a lot. But even with these flowers over here, the more you kind of layer on top of this white, the more it just stands out. And I think it's so pretty. So I'm going to go in now with some masking fluid for the bottom and do the exact same thing that I just did up top with my white flowers, except I do not want to use my nice brush. So masking fluid is not very kind to your brushes. Yeah, that was not a good idea. Okay, so I'm going to go in now with my masking fluid, and I'm going to use an older brush just because masking fluid has a record of kind of ruining my brushes. So using the exact same technique as what I have been doing with the other flowers, I'm going to be painting on my loose petals. Now with masking fluid, it's kind of important to work really quickly because it dries really fast. And again, it does have a tendency to ruin brushes, which is not nice. The key here is to make sure that your flowers are kind of bigger the front of your page than the flowers towards the back. Helps with that depth perception. And that my brush is drying, or the masking fluid's drying on my brush, so it's getting kind of goopy. And then this usually just takes, I don't know, a minute or two, if that, depending on how thick you apply this masking fluid. It doesn't take very long to dry at all, and you'll kind of know as well when you touch it, it's not as tacky. I did do a flower right here that I think I am going to cover with masking fluid just over top where I put my white, because I want to paint around this. It's just too faint. Oh, got some goopy masking fluid. There we go. Yeah, I definitely recommend using an older brush. So while this dries, I'm going to go over top with just a couple of these with just one more layer of this stuff. On these, I'm going to go in now with a second layer on these centers and just touch different points of it, probably around where the petals should be and around the very top to give it a little bit more pop. And I'm just using the very tip of my brush, doing little dotting motions around where I kind of feel like I could use a little bit of depth to it. So around the centers for sure, and then I just kind of touch the top just a little bit. This helps it stand out that much more. Okay, so while this one dries, it won't take very long at all, I'm going to be mixing up my color that I want to use. And I want it to be a little bit darker than what I already have down now, but to keep kind of consistent and make the focal point my strawberries and, you know, my nice flowers that I've just painted. I don't want to go too dark. I don't want to distract and kind of pull away, but I'm definitely I'm going to go around here. And this will also help the flowers that I just put the masking fluid on, and even these ones right here, break it up a bit and make them pop. So you're going to see that I am not going to be covering absolutely everything what I did the first time around, and I'm using the wet on dry technique. I think I got some masking fluid. Nope. Okay. And wherever I see that there is just a little bit of some harsh lines, I'm going to go in with just water and kind of break it up just a bit because I don't want it to be too harsh. And I have loaded up my brush quite a bit with some water. I'm going to add a little bit of indigo. I want it to just be a little bit, yeah, there we go. And then just touching around different parts. Now I kind of want to pay attention a bit because I didn't put masking fluid over top my buds, which you could do. Like now that you have your buds right here, you could definitely put some masking fluid on top over there. I didn't do that. Just kind of left it going in around different parts. And I'm also going to be leaving that first layer, this green part over here, I'm going to be leaving that first color as well. I don't want to completely cover it. I think it's really pretty, so it's just kind of randomly going in. I also want to leave right here a bit for the basket, but I will come right here to the base and make it a little bit darker. So yeah, it's just kind of looking around, taking your time, trying not to go, which I've already done, on your bud. Also trying to leave some of that original green color in as well. And again, if you're not confident with this part, you can only put masking fluid over where you just were. But I'm going to go in here, especially to the crease, just kind of add a little bit more fine detail. And I don't want there to be any type of harsh lines as well. So I am going to use some water to kind of just break it up a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy at this part. Just going to add a little bit more to the background at different points. I'm using a very washed out green color. I'm being careful to not go over top because again I do not have masking fluid.
Yes, even just using the smallest amount of green is definitely just making it stand out a little bit more over here. Flowers.
Okay. I'm gonna go in just because I'm feeling a little crazy. I'm gonna go in with a wash of just a darker color, and I'm not gonna go over much more, but just little spots, just to do little pops of a darker color. I feel like that would just look really pretty, especially around like the base of the basket right here. It's still wet, I'm going in again. And with that wash color, I'm going into the top parts, adding just a hint of some more shadow colors. It's just going to be basically us rotating between our shadows and our light color. Let's do that. Okay, so when that basket is dry, you're going to see some of the ink marks, and we're going to go ahead and fill those with another wash of brown. And you're going to see that I'm not painting one after another. I'm kind of skipping over some of the lines. That way they have time to dry before I touch it with another brown color, and that's going to give us the wicker basket effect that we're looking for. Just grabbing different shades of brown, try not
different
to
shades
let them touch at this point. We're just going to be moving around.
And it's gonna slowly start to come together. Now over here I didn't do a lot of fine lines. You're gonna have to freehand some of your lines over here as well.
So once you have the wash of some of this brown, you want to let it dry. You can go in around the edge of the basket and you can create a little bit of a shadow line right there as well. It just kind of helps break up the top of the basket from the wicker part. So you'll see right here how it's just kind of jumped forward. I had some issues with my camera, but I just repeated what I did over and over again, just with different shades of brown, again to give it that wicker effect. And I did it all the way around the basket at the top, at the bottom of the basket, kind of following my ink marks.
Way too thick.
And then also with the handle as well, I created my own lines, rotating between different shades of brown. And you can still see some gaps here, so I'm going in and filling out the gaps until I'm happy with the wicker basket and all of the browns. what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and clean up the edges. I'm going to go around the basket and add a wash of brown to kind of act as a layer and kind of connect this part up top. I really don't want there to be a harsh line, so I'm going to try to scoop up ever so gently. And just using a wash of the brown, I'm going around, getting rid of the water on my brush, tapping my napkin, and just touching the edge of that brown. I'm going to blend it out. I'm going to do it again, right here. I'm going to go around the edge right here as well. And right here as well. Blend out any type of harsh line with just water on my brush. Around here as well. And around the bottom right here too. Spreading it out to go down a bit. So I want to add just a little bit more detail into this part right here, just kind of make it stand out that much more. Okay, cool. Feel pretty good about that. Now on to removing this. And you'll see, and I'm just using the very tip of my finger. I'm doing circular motions. Now, one thing to remember as you're getting close to your basket, if your basket is not 100% dry, you're either going to smudge your piece or it's going to rip your page. So make sure what you're touching is actually dry. So I want to add just a little bit more detail to these petals at the bottom, just to make them stand out and pop a little bit. In the very tips of my brush, using a wash of like a greeny gray color, and I'm going to go into the centers and just kind of do little lines almost, just to kind of create a look where there's a shadow. If I find, especially like right here, there's not much, you can't really see the flower, the petals, I'm going to go in and just add a little bit more green, just so you can see it. Right here was really hard to see. Right here as well, just needed something. And right here. And you'll see I'm going very quickly, just using the very tips of my brush. I'm not spending too much time on these, because again, these are not my focal points. I just don't want them to look too sloppy, but they are supposed to look loose, very loose watercolor florals. And now the last thing to do at the bottom as well is just to add those stems. The last thing I want to do with these flowers is I want there to be a little bit more pop with the yellow. So I'm going to go in with just yellow on my brush and try to just add a pop of yellow. And I'm going less water, more product, more paint on my brush to get this effect. When you have a lot more water on your brush, that's when you create that wash and it kind of dilutes the paint. So if you want your painting to be very bright and vibrant, you want less water, more paint. That's what I want to do right here. I want less water, more paint on my brush. I'm not completely covering in all of the tops that were here before. I'm leaving some gaps, some white space of that first layer of the greeny yellow wash that we've done. And I'm using the very tips of my brush and I'm just kind of doing random lots, different spots. It also gave me an opportunity to kind of look at my page and my flowers so that I'm able just to add a little bit more detail to maybe some of them that I missed before. Let's move on to the leaves of the strawberry. So I'm just going to be mixing some darker, I'm going to mix some indigo. And the same thing that I just kind of did with my buds, I'm also going to be doing with this part right here. Is I'm just going to be blotting different points of this sleeve. To give the effect that there's some depth to it. Making sure I'm also leaving that original color as well. I'm not completely covering it with the dark color. And this is when you're going to see, when you're applying your final details, that this is when your painting definitely comes to life. And this is the part that at least when I was teaching my workshops in person, that people struggled with the most is they would just look at their painting and be like, okay, I don't want to mess it up. It's looking pretty good. But it's this last final step where you can dive in, add your final wet on dry details that really can transform your piece. But it can be kind of tricky to want to get there and just trust the process that you're not going to ruin your painting. Or I guess overwork your painting too. The exact same technique as the centers. I'm using the very tip of my brush. I'm blotting around different points. I'm not really, particularly using a special technique for it. I'm just making sure that I'm leaving that original grain to show through. I have now gone and mixed a darker indigo color into it so I can add a third layer. And I'll probably stop at the third layer. And I'm tapping less than my middle layer, which I just did, with my darker color, and just hitting different points. But definitely going less than what I just did. Let's give it that extra pop. We're almost at the end. We're almost there, guys. Okay, for now I'm happy with that, and I want to dry this. All right, so remember we just talked about trusting the process. We're going to trust the process here, and I'm going to do, especially for the ones at the front, I'm going to do like little lines with a darker red color. Circular kind of domes around. Okay, so to bring you closer, you'll see I'm just using the very tip of my brush, doing very small oval lines and repeating this over and over. Because your strawberries are already dry, we're able to come in here and add some layering, because if we were to do this while it was wet, everything would just bleed and you would not get these crisp lines. So I'm going in with the darker color now, kind of around the strawberries that are at the bottom. And I'm kind of doing the same technique, but because they are supposed to be dark and hidden, I'm just kind of focusing on making sure I have like a smooth line around my other strawberries or like even my basket. The same thing as when you're painting the flowers in the distance, the less detail you actually want your strawberries to have, right? So you don't have to worry about especially on this strawberry right here, because the top of the strawberry is kind of back here, I want to make sure I have a lot more detail towards this part that is closer to us versus maybe down here where it's a lot more spread apart and less detailed. And I'm also paying attention to where my highlight is because I don't want to completely cover. So you'll see when I'm going over like my highlight part right here, I'm kind of not avoiding it, but using more of a wash to go in. And I'm paying attention to where even my shadow part is as well. So if my shadow part's right here, I would go in with like a darker red. So trying to stay consistent with the original shadows that you've already done. Again, towards the back, I'm not too worried about the details as much. So I'm just doing little, kind of like little dots towards the back, and I'm using definitely more of a wash. I am more pigment. The strawberry right here, I'm doing a wash. Down here, I'll do more of a wash because it's already so light. Changing to a darker red. So come over here. And now this is a strawberry, one big strawberry right here. And to make this a little bit more interesting, what we can do is go in with this white that we have, and you can even just touch different points of it to make it look like there is some sun, and just give it a little bit more pop at different points. It kind of come to life a bit more. And I'm using the very tip of my brush, and I'm doing the smallest little dots possible. I'm even going to do a wash of this around the side of this one here. One thing about this as well is it does dry a little bit darker than what you put down too. Using the very tip of my brush, doing the smallest little dots.